If you know your way around the scale, you're really only a half step away from where you need to be at any given time. So just go for it.
Today we're breaking down the 5 levels of bluegrass guitar. Your guide is bluegrass phenom Shaun Richardson. He's toured with Ricky Skaggs, traded licks with Bela Fleck, and now plays guitar in Sierra Hull's band. In this episode, he breaks down the 5 levels of bluegrass guitar, but it's not just a lesson, it's a peek into how top-tier players actually think, practice, and play. So whether you're just starting out or you're chasing that next level in your bluegrass playing, this episode is absolutely packed with gold. By the way, my name is Spencer from Sonora Guitar Intensive, and this series is brought to you in collaboration with our friends at Carter Vintage Guitars here in Nashville, Tennessee. If you want more in-depth interviews with world-class players, hit the subscribe button because we have a lot more coming. And with that, let's jump into it.
All right. Shaun, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. This is great.
Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff I want to cover today. We're going to dive into the 5 levels of bluegrass guitar.
Yes.
But before we dive into that, I want to learn a little bit more about your background and kind of what got you into the guitar and your experience so far in your career. Take me back to kind of where it started for you.
Yeah, I'm from Michigan originally. Grew up, there's actually a great music scene in Michigan, firmly around singer-songwriter, but there's all kinds of music going on up there, which is super inspiring as a young person getting into music. I have a musical family member. My uncle is a musician still to this day. He's primarily a pedal steel guitar player, but also played some violin. So when I was very, very young, I wore out tapes of him playing. And he's basically, he's the whole reason I'm doing this anyways. So he's a violin player, and I would set up, and I'm a kid of the 90s, so we all had Tinker toys. I'd make my own instruments out of them. And I remember my pedal steel was a little folding table, and my microphone was a plastic golf club stuck into a milk jug. And I would stand in front of the TV and pretend I was him for hours. So that was sort of my very earliest intro to music, was the violin. I got one when I was 4. And I don't play anymore because nobody wants to hear that. But shortly after that, we were given a Down from the Mountain soundtrack from the movie Oh Brother Where Art Thou. And that was my first experience hearing bluegrass for the first time. And it was also the first concert I ever went to. And I got bit by the bug pretty early on, getting that record. And then a little later on, we got Alison Krauss, Union Station, So Long, So Wrong, and I wore it out. I can still tell you to this day, every place the original disc skips, because I wore it out like crazy. And we got some early Nickel Creek records, and I just developed this love for acoustic-based music. And not so far along after violin, I picked up the mandolin at age 7, and then found guitar eventually at age 8. And this felt like home when I found it.
Yeah. And when you first got into it, was it bluegrass that was the main kind of genre that you were really into?
Yeah, for sure. Well, being an aspiring acoustic guitar player at the time, I was struck by the idea that guitar could have its own lead voice too. And listening to some people early on, especially Doc Watson probably being the earliest, some Norman Blake, and then eventually finding Tony Rice, which left a big mark for a lot of bluegrass players. It was fun to hear this very supportive by nature instrument become a lead instrument as well. So I would say that those primarily were my biggest listens as far as bluegrass guitar goes.
And what was the process for you kind of like learning it? Were you going to jam sessions? Talk to me about that.
Going to some jams. I played with my family growing up a bit. So doing a lot of playing that way, but also even less than going to jams. It's just bringing the jam to my house, playing the records really was the thing. I'd pretend I was the 6th member of a 5-piece band and just play along to the record on guitar. And that was sort of how I learned a lot of facility on the instrument, different tunes, chords, music theory. I didn't know how to attach it to anything verbally at the time. I knew, this sound, or this sound, or good, this sound, or this sound, or those things were all informative just from a listening standpoint and transcribing as a young kid, just playing the records and learning the tunes that way.
Yeah. When did you start playing more professionally?
I played growing up a ton, and when I turned 18, the same uncle that played with an artist back in the 80s had recommended me to that same country artist. So I played with him for a couple of years. And then I moved to Nashville when I was 20, and I've been here the last 10 years just playing with different acts and doing a lot of sessions, I've been lucky enough to play with a ton of my heroes. I've done a good amount of playing with Ricky Skaggs, who I grew up listening to live at the Charleston, and Bluegrass Rules, all those records, Ancient Tones. So his longtime guitar player during, or maybe slightly after the pandemic, moved back home to Utah to be closer to his family, and I got the opportunity to fill in on a lot of smaller runs that he wasn't doing. So that was a bit of a surreal moment to play songs that I had rehearsed to my whole life, just in my basement casually as a young person, and then all of a sudden you're on stage. And another major record for me growing up was Tales from the Acoustic Planet Volume 2, the Bluegrass Sessions, which was, Tony was on that, and it was a Bela Fleck record with Sam Bush, Jerry Douglas, Mark Schatz, all these guys. And I filled in on a 8-day run of shows on that tour, and that another surreal moment of like, wow, we're playing Blue Mountain Hop, you know, and a few songs from that record, plus a big catalog of music from My Bluegrass Heart record, which when he reached out to me about filling in, it was in February, and the tour is slotted for September, and I spent probably that entire time listening to that album on repeat, so I could fully be immersed in the music and interact with it versus just performing it.
How did you get to the point where you got the call? Like, one, how did you get connected, and then how did they kind of like test you out, so to speak? And like,
man, the backstory on how I even was, recommended maybe even to fill in on that gig is slightly unknown to me, but I had worked with Bela once before. We were filming a Christmas special that never ended up airing for another band I was working for a long time called Daly and Vincent, bluegrass group. They do a lot, but at the time it was more of a bluegrass gig. And so they paired me up with Bela to do an arrangement of Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy. So I went to his house and we worked it out together. And that's really the only music we had made up at that point. But I may have just been recommended, or he remembered that we had made some music together, and he reached out to see if I'd be interested. And of course I was interested. And it was such a great and challenging time in my life to learn that whole record. I think it's like between 15 and 20 songs. I just wanted to have fully committed to memory. So I always love a challenge. I embrace learning. I'm an avid learner. So like it was a really full circle experience, sort of blending in like, wow, I'm playing songs from a hero of mine, a childhood record I listened to, but also like a challenge of a gig. Like I'm having to learn all this stuff and serve it. I want to make sure that when I step in, anytime I fill in with somebody or play a gig that I'm not normally on, I want them to feel totally comfortable when I'm there, like nothing's missing. Like we feel like we're playing these same songs. We're not having to drag somebody along on nuances or particular arrangement stuff. I want to make sure I'm fully prepared.
100%.
Yeah.
And I know, bluegrass is very much an oral tradition, and not a lot of folks in the tradition start by learning a bunch of theory stuff.
Yeah.
Like you're pretty well versed in that. At what point in your life did that become a focus area? And when did you acquire it?
Probably my early 20s was the biggest deep dive into broader harmony. I played bluegrass my whole childhood, and I wanted to learn what other voices the guitar has. So studying jazz guitar, learning standards, transcribing, piano players like Bill Evans is one of my favorite musicians. The way he can make a song be so lush, like the voicings. I'm so envious of piano players because they have this giant reach, and guitar can tend to be a little more closed, but trying to find ways to incorporate some of that language into guitar and, pivoting back to bluegrass. Somebody like Tony Rice was so pivotal in fusing those two genres, in his playing. He loved, voicings, all sort of lush guitar voicings, and his tone just naturally sounded like a dark piano. It's so big, and every note rang forever. And just those were probably the biggest studies as far as broadening my musical knowledge. Learning sort of not necessarily fixated on theory, but just learning how harmony works. I've always been into harmony. I learned, my mom taught my brother and I how to harmonize together when we were super young. So like that's sort of ingrained in my being, is like denser harmony, but still in a song-serving way. I don't ever want to insert something that's not fitting per se.
Right. Super interesting. And who were your mentors growing up? Who were the people that taught you?
Man, I had a mentor for a long time who, I owe a lot to. He was so good. I started taking conventional lessons, but never really loved sticking to I always got ahead of myself, and they wanted me to practice scales for a long time, and I was sort of like, I'd like to play tunes. So I went through a bunch of teachers until we found the right one who was like, yeah, let's learn some tunes. I'll help you figure out the things that you can't quite figure out at this age. And his name is Neil Woodward, and he's got the title of Michigan State Troubadour. So he plays probably 20 different instruments. He knows the history of the state, folk songs. It was super cool. Like growing up, he let us open up some shows for him when we were youngsters, and it was just like, it could have been the biggest thing in the world. And so he taught me. He played guitar, he played mandolin, he played banjo. We just, anytime I was working on something new and couldn't quite pick out something, he'd be a second set of ears, and we just learned stuff together. And between that and playing to records and just being diligent about listening over and over and over again, training my ear, I think those would be the two biggest ways I learned my instrument.
And did you have a band growing up that you gigged with regularly? How'd you get used to playing live?
Yeah, played with my family for a while. My brother and my cousin, we lived next door to each other, and we all played different instruments. So we had that growing up as far as practical playing. And I had a few friends that also played, young musicians playing bluegrass, but I didn't really do that much outside jamming at festivals. I mean, I would attend them and do a lot more listening. The playing was pretty much, a lot of the times it was just me by myself playing guitar, any instrument at any given time, just sort of learning the nuance of it on my own study. And that self-study kind of carried on into my 20s. I'm always very much one to YouTube's a great reference. I learn a ton on YouTube, watching people play, and always been a self-study.
What are the recent rabbit holes for you? Recent
rabbit holes, I think more so, we were having a conversation about it earlier. So when you get into, let's, for the sake of example, bluegrass guitar, it can be very flashy and a lot of 16th notes and super facility and fast playing. And I've spent a ton of time learning how to do that, especially for practical use and my own skill. And but most recently, I've been diving into just stripping it back to the basics, learning how to support people rhythmically. I've been definitely studying, more of the rhythmic nuance of somebody like Tony Rice, who I spent a lot of time growing up learning, but it's easy to learn the tunes and then not learn the rhythmic side. But for me, my biggest takeaway of Tony's playing is just the rhythmic sensibilities. There's a tune that he recorded on called Song on the Strings, which Alison Krauss recorded, and there's a lot of rhythmic nuance. I could demonstrate a little of that. Yeah, poor man's version, but so trying to lean into some of that stuff, that's what gets me going these days. I'm like, wow, that's so supportive and so playful and interactive, and the way it interacts with a bass that's just playing quarter notes. It feels so good when the band's just grooving like that. And he was such a good force on the guitar for that type of stuff. So I'm digging into that a lot recently.
Super cool. And I guess lately we've been doing a couple things. You've been playing with Sierra Hull's band.
Yes.
We just spoke with. And you also been working on your own music, solo arrangement, which we'll have you play a little bit later.
Sure.
Can you talk about what directions your guitar playing has been going over the last couple of years, and maybe where you see it going?
Yeah. I've been playing with Sierra for about 4 years now, and she's just so great. She's such great facility on her instrument. And she's got these amazing songs. And when she was forming this particular band, she put together a great group of musicians that really have a great chemistry together. It's a 5-piece band, guitar, mandolin, fiddle, bass, and drums. So everybody kind of has their own space to do their thing, and she's super supportive about leaning into everyone's strengths. And a lot of the music on this recent record that just came out, she wrote for the band to play. So a lot of that music is completely fresh, and the soloists in the band, everybody's so strong, but especially from a soloistic standpoint, like the lead players, her and our fiddle player, are just so strong on their instruments. So they've definitely pushed me to maximize my potential and try to keep up most of the time, as far as improvising goes, and just, treating each song in a certain way and leaning into the strengths that you have and supporting everybody. Music is about listening. So like, and especially in a gig like that, like I'm listening to them and I'm trying to cater my playing to support them the best. We have in-ears so we can make our own mix on stage, and I've got a ton of bass, because bass and guitar need to go together. They got to be a locked rhythm section. So I'm listening to what he's doing, and I'm trying to stay out of his way and find voicings that complement the strength of his low notes and allow them to ring without me getting into his territory, or especially because guitar can get into the low end, it can hover in the high end, and it's like I also have a space right in the middle where neither of those instruments generally sit. So I've got my own place to sort of be lush and be supportive, and that's definitely changed my playing in a way to just be reactionary and supportive and listen and find my space to fill. And from a lead perspective, of course, just trying to, not necessarily surprise my bandmates with something new, but, give them something new to listen to, so I'm not overusing the same things that are just comfort points of my playing, which we all have, and they're great to fall back on. But it's such an improvisational gig at times. I mean, not all the time, but certain times it lends itself to stretch out and do your own thing. So I just want to constantly have a unique voice and grow my vocabulary just like anybody would.
Yeah, and that's super cool. Well, if you're open to it, I'd love to dig into some of these levels.
Let's do it.
We're talking about the 5 levels of bluegrass guitar, and really what we want to cover is kind of someone who's just getting into bluegrass guitar for the first time, all the way up to someone at your level who you're playing it, at a very high level. And I wonder if we can kind of dive into level 1 here.
Sure, absolutely. Let's take a song that I probably learned when I was just picking up the guitar, called Soldier's Joy. It's a very simple song. It's got 3 chords. It's a lot of the fiddle tunes played on guitar are generally out of 2 shapes. They're either the C shape or the G shape, and this song would be out of the C shape. But commonly, I think I learned it in the key of D, so we'll play it out of this shape for the sake of the tradition of it. So the chords of the song, or I'll play the melody first so you guys can get an idea of what the melody sounds like. This in its most basic form would be Soldier's Joy. So it's just really, even the melody itself outlines those 3 chords, which is the same shape that you're playing. Same chord shape. And on the B section, there's that 4 chord right there, same shape. Has a lot of openness to it. Very digestible as far as associating a melody with those same chord shapes.
So the first step really is just kind of digesting that, maybe breaking it down into small pieces, memorizing that melody.
Sure.
And then learning the chord progression.
And learning the chord progression, which I'll play for you as well. Here's the beat part. And that repeats. So that would be the full form.
Great.
So I repeat the B section, but
Cool. So someone learns that tune.
Yeah.
Where do they go from there?
well,
What does level 2 look like?
I'd say we know what the melody is. Let's make sure we're aware of what chords we're playing. Of course, this is the 1 chord. You know, in Nashville here, everything gets assigned a number. So I think it's good to learn that as well. You know, on a rather than just a letter association as well. Because in this case, the letter doesn't necessarily line up with. I'm playing out of a C position, but the song's in D. So for the sake of just basic numbers, you know, you've got a 1, you've got a 5 in the A section, and then in the B section, you've got 1, and it goes to the 4. Obviously back to the 1 and the 5. So those are the 3 chords of the song. You know that they're a D, G, and A.
Yeah.
A 1, 4, and a 5, which is the most probably fundamental tension and release. Music's all about conflict and resolution. This begs to go back to the 1, and this also begs to go back to the 1, you know, from different sides of the circle of fifths, if you would.
Yeah.
So that would be, I'd say that's fundamental. And then let's get into spicing up our rhythm a bit. You know, I sort of alluded to a little bit when I was teaching the chords, but as a rhythm guitar player, you're sort of outlining what the bass player's job is too. Sort of accenting those roots and fifths. So maybe you could be conscious about passing tones. Or maybe walk to 5. Maybe we walk to the 4 chord on the B section. Maybe we add the 5th on below the 5 chord there to give it a different sort of tonality. We use like a chromatic substitution there on the walk back to the 5. So there's certain simple ways to breathe a little life into the rhythm rather than just us. Or you know, with the right hand too. Maybe we start adding a little bit of accents. And you can get way carried away with that too. Adding more subdivision, that's a great way to spice up your rhythm, because I feel like once you learn how to get to the furthest extent, you can sort of tone that back and add them where they're impactful. Maybe at the end of the phrase.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, super, super cool. Okay, so they're spicing up the rhythm. And I guess at this stage, too, it would be helpful for them to kind of know the context in which they're choosing those notes to walk around. So
Sure.
Learning a little bit of the scale structure on those lower strings so that they can...
Totally. Yeah, I mean, when you're, especially with the 1, 4, 5, you know, we're in the key of D here. So we know what a D major scale is supposed to sound like. It's pretty much all we have on as far as low end goes. So say we're walking back up to the 1 chord from the 5 chord. Well, we know that the walk up will start on the 5 and use the 6, 7, 1 to walk back up, which is like one of the most simple transitions between chords. It's just like a walking up to it. And that's just the first 4 notes, even in the the D major scale. But it walks up to that next chord, or we could walk down to the 5 chord. So just being sort of aware of where you are within those different scales. I mean, you can outline all 3 of those keys within the D major scale. It's all diatonic. But they're all, I probably could play the melody of that song just outlining the D major scale.
Yeah, totally. What else do you think that people need to know at this like level 2 level?
I'd say at this point you could incorporate some of those, let's, you know, make the rhythm a little more interesting, but let's also maybe make the melody a little more interesting rhythmically. Like let's maybe we could push some stuff. It's the same melody, paying homage to the melody, but we're adding a little bit of rhythmic flair to it to make it interesting. So it's not as rigid as everything doesn't fall on that. It's sort of downbeat. It's sort of pushed or like an accent. Yeah. Or even adding those little chromatic passing tones, which is, if you know your way around the scale, you're really only a half step away from where you need to be at any given time. So just go for it. There's no wrong note. It's just about how you resolve it. I mean, in the scale, that would sound pretty bad on its own, but if it's fine, if it's making its way to a destination, then you're good.
Yeah. Great. Okay, so we're at level 2. We've got some spiced up rhythm. What happened next? Where do we go?
Well, let's spice up the melody a little bit. You know, someone like Doc or Tony would have probably done all of this, you know? Let's take the song, for example, and, you know, in bluegrass guitar, one of the most common licks is like a G run. You probably learned that on day 2. So we know that's out of the G position, and that's the second chord in this song. So what if we superimpose that into the melody of the song? Or maybe another guitar trope would be, which you would hear maybe Jerry Reed play or something like that.
Yeah.
So finding little licks that you've absorbed from other music listening experiences and throw them into the melody. I mean, it's totally recognizable as the melody, even though it isn't part of the melody, but it's serving the role of the song. Or maybe you know, a big C-shaped bluegrass language. You could play, which you might hear Doc play. It's sort of outlining that C6 tonality. So maybe that's at the end of the phrase. Which sort of incorporates some of that rhythmic stuff, sort of incorporates some of the basic bluegrass guitar language that you'd hear on any fiddle tune, and kind of combines all those into making your melody a little more interesting. Or maybe we play like a counter melody. Maybe, since we know the melody is, let's go up a third and play the harmony. Just subtle ways to serve the song, but use the language that you're acquiring and make it interesting.
Yeah, it's great. And who should folks be listening to at these first few levels? I mean, obviously throughout their time with bluegrass, but who would you recommend they listen to?
I'd say Doc and Norman Blake be great. Those two, especially on the early side of traditional lead bluegrass guitar, sort of pioneered the instrument as a lead, for sure. And you're going to find a lot of homage to the melody and a lot of homage to chord shape voicings, and as far as within the melody, all that stuff is big part of their sound.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've spiced up the melody a little bit. We've got a couple of ideas to kind of incorporate, especially as we kind of go from the C shape to the G shape, and finish the phrase. Where do we go from here?
We can get into some more advanced territory too, and maybe a guy like Tony would have taken the traditional thing, but he would also incorporate his own voice. So he might add a little like a chromatic, like a substitution quarterly. You know, there's a big thing in jazz, just like a 2-5-1. It's just pivoting from the 2 minor to the 5 to the 1. It's all about resolving on the circle of fifths. So we could add that E minor, or I guess it would be a D minor shape, but a 2 minor voicing before the 5 chord in our rhythm, and still support the melody, because all those notes would fit fine with if the bass was playing an A underneath it. It'd be like a sus voicing. So maybe. And that's a way to add a little, pull something else from another genre or another style of music into a traditional tune. You could take it one step further, and you could add like the 6 minor going into the 2 and 5. And that creates a really interesting sound. And obviously, you don't want to overuse those textures in a simple song, but as long as you're getting back home, there's a way to make it work. And I would say too, you could look into different styles of picking too. Like there's a style called cross picking as well, which is like it'll add a different rhythmic cadence to a song like that. And somebody like Clarence White would have been a great example, or in the mandolin, someone like Jesse McReynolds would have done a lot of cross picking, which would sound like. So that's definitely would be an advanced picking pattern, but it's really pretty simple if you think about it. The way I would approach it would just be you're playing whatever string you're on and then hitting the one above it and then the one below it. It's almost like a banjo roll in a way. It's all about that bounce and that lilt. So you could add that to take your solo up to a different notch, and you sort of combine both of those worlds of reharmonization, basic reharmonization, and rhythmic cadencing as far as the right hand technique is concerned, and it makes for a really interesting and unique solo at that point.
It seems like at this point too, we want to be kind of expanding the vocabulary that we have around the genre. So learning some more kind of like classic bluegrass licks as well as some endings. Could you show us?
Yeah, sure. I think there's definitely a lot of common licks you may hear in a song like that. I think a really common one is obviously the classic. It's just a chromatic lick all the way up to from the bottom note to the tonic. That's a super common one. And we could use that same lick to end the song. Everybody's like, well, we're playing the song, how do we get out of it? So a very common way to end a song too would be like, and I mean there's different endings for different keys. Like that's a very common C-shape ending. All those licks sort of work together in tandem to end the song. Let's say the song was in G, very common Tony Rice ending. Which if you notice, the back half of that is that same G run that we learned way early on. And it's not to say that like we have to end every song this way, but some of them, they're just tried and true. Yeah. We know we're closing the song out.
Yeah, that's great. Are there any other endings in G or C that you find to be really common?
Yeah, I mean, maybe.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and it all falls within the same rhythmic parameter, but there I added a little bit of sweep picking, which kind of adds another layer of rhythm. I like to do that a lot in my playing if it makes sense, or if I can get to the right place. I'm in my right hand enough to execute it and continue the flow of the line I'm trying to play.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, so we're at this point now where we've got a little bit of vocabulary. We've got end songs. We have spiced up the melody a little bit with some texture there. Mm-hmm. We've spiced up the rhythm. Where do we go from here?
Well, I think you sort of combine all those things and apply them. And we could play the song a couple times. I could try to maybe I could start at level 1 and we could play maybe the song 3 times through, and I can sort of start adding stuff in each time.
Sounds great.
Want to do it?
Yep, let's do it.
Yeah, man.
Super cool stuff. Awesome, man. Well, this was amazing. Is there anything else that we might share with folks kind of at this level once they get to the point where they can kind of solo and play the chord changes and play the melody and all that stuff? Is there anything else that they might explore beyond this point?
Yeah, I mean, music to me is about interacting with the people you're making music with. So just having good ears and listening to what somebody's saying, it's like having a conversation. So if I was playing the song with somebody and they ended the phrase, maybe I would start the A section of the next one. It's just like having a conversation, agreeing with what someone's saying and then adding to it. Just listening and absorbing the things that you love and your heroes. And then trying to find your own voice. Nobody plays like you do. So try to maximize what you love and find your voice on your instrument and play like yourself, because nobody will do a better job playing like you than you.
100%.
Yeah, man.
Well, this is really great. I would love for you to play your new piece that you just released.
Yeah.
But before we do that, is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience?
Thanks for having me here. I've worked a lot with Carter over the years doing video demos, and this has been a treat to have a conversation about guitar, and I'm super honored to be here. And yeah, I put out a song recently. I haven't released much music, if any. I spend a lot of time in the studio as a session musician here in Nashville, playing on people's records in both country, landscape, and bluegrass and beyond. And for my 30th birthday, I wanted to give a song back to the world. So it was actually a song that I had played on one of the demos here, and some people had been like, what song is that? Someone was transcribing it, and another person was like, I'd love to hear it. So I recorded the guitar and mandolin myself, and I sent it to some very talented friends of mine I was gracious enough to give their time and play on it with me. And it was a great experience to put something out that meant a lot to me. And it's been nice to have something to hold on to as my own. Some of that, plays for a lot of people, and I love doing that. It's nice to have something that's like, oh, that's mine. And I appreciate having a song out.
Oh, that's so cool, man. Very cool.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear it.
Sure.
Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.